Well, I am so excited about the next 5 weeks as we talk about what God designed his church to be, what it should look like. And we also share some cool stuff that God is doing here at Kara City. And every bumper each week will be a different person or couple talking about how God has made a difference in their life through this group of believers. Now, what's interesting about the church is that Jesus didn't talk a lot about the church because during his ministry, the Jesus movement was focused pretty exclusively on the person of Jesus Christ and his closest followers. But on several occasions, he does talk about how important the church is going to be after he rises from the dead and ascends back into heaven. At one point in time, he tells his followers that on the truth that he is the Son of God, he's going to build his church. And on that truth, they're going to be so powerful that not even the gates of hell can stand against his church. And then look at what he says in John 14:12 when he's talking about the believers in the church after he goes back to heaven. He says, "Very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these because I am going to the Father." And at first glance, that doesn't look like that could be right. He's saying that the church is going to do greater things than he did. Now, he's the Son of God on earth, and he does crazy things with miracles and stuff that we can't stick with. But he wasn't saying that we're going to do a more amazing feats and miracles than he did. But he is saying that we will spread the gospel through the church to more places around the world and to more people than he did. And it turns out that's exactly true. The church has spread the gospel at this point pretty much throughout the world, and lives have been changed. In fact, did you know that more people decided to follow Jesus on the day the church was born, on the day of Pentecost? Peter preaches a sermon, and over 3,000 people decide to become part of this church, to follow Jesus and be baptized. In that one moment, more people are noted to follow Jesus than during Jesus' entire ministry. And so the church has done that. And very quickly, the gospel spreads throughout the Roman Empire, to Asia and Africa and Europe. And the word of God and the love of God and the message of God has spread throughout the world. Let me be very clear, though. I'm not saying that the Big C church hasn't made some big mistakes over the years. In the last 2,000 years, the church has made mistakes. The church has hurt people. And even today, the church makes mistakes. This church will make mistakes. The Big C church makes mistakes. And look, if you've been hurt by a church, you're not alone. And I just want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you, because that was not God's intent for his church, and that's not the church we want to be here at Kara City. But that's why I think it's so important, and I'm so excited about the next 5 weeks as we talk about what the church should be, as Jesus intended. The Greek word for church that's used about 114 times in the New Testament is the word ekklesia. And ekklesia literally means the called out. The Bible is very clear that the church is not a place. It's not a day and time of the week. Church is us. It's a movement of people. I love how Mark Batterson says this. He says, the church is not a building to be occupied, but a movement to be unleashed. We are the church. Some of you guys may not know the history of Kara City Church. We've been a church for just over 2 years at this point in time. And Lil and I were called to plant this church in roughly November of 2020. I was pretty convinced that I was done with formal church work and would not be a pastor again. But I began to get this feeling that God was calling us to plant a church. And so one night I said to Lil, so I got this crazy idea. What do you think about starting a church? And she was actually much more positive about that than I expected her to be. She said, yeah, let me think about it and pray about it. We can talk about it. And in 2 weeks, she decided she was in. She was ready. It took me 2 more months because I'm a little more stubborn. And I was a little hurt and a little sad from my last ministry. And I really did think God was done with me. And plus, the idea of starting a church seemed a little crazy. I didn't know anything about planning a church. I'd taken one seminary class called Evangelism and Church Planning, and I didn't remember anything about it, but that's all I really knew was what I'd learned in that class, and I was about 30 years older than the typical church planner. There were a whole lot of reasons not to start a church, But there was one reason that kind of overrode all those other reasons, and that is because Lil and I became more and more convinced that God wanted us to start a church. And so we started putting together the details of what does it look like to start a church. Obviously, we needed someone to lead music, because when I sing, angels cry, they just do. We needed a place to meet. A building seemed like an important part of that. We also started looking at names. We had to have a name for our church, and there were lots of cool names we ran across, but they just didn't have the biblical or the theological connection that we wanted it to have. One of the names I remember really liking was Ignite. Ignite Church. That sounds really cool. Ignite. We're Ignite. But it just didn't have the theological connection that we wanted. And so we started looking at different Greek words from the New Testament. And as soon as Lil came across the word charis and said it, it just immediately stuck. Because charis is the Greek word for grace. Grace is defined as the unexpected, undeserved love and favor of God. Grace is what saves us through our faith. Grace is what changes us. And when you study grace and God's grace for us, you see how lavish it is, how unexpected it is, how over the top that grace is. But Lil and I didn't want to just start a church that felt this grace of God and experienced this grace of God and kind of kept it for ourselves. We wanted to start a church that shared that same grace, that lavish love with each other and with the community around us. Because we believe that it is that grace that can change the world. And so we came up with the name Charis City Church, because we believe that through grace, or charis, God can change our city if we show that kind of grace and love to the people around us. Well, today we're kicking off the Church Is sermon series by talking about how the church is family. How can we support one another? How can we encourage one another? How can we love one another like the first church in the New Testament did? And we're going to actually share a couple of stories, and I think you're going to be really encouraged by some of the things our church is already doing to love each other and to encourage and help one another. But here's the thing. I think there's a tendency when you hear a sermon like this, you get excited, you clap because it's cool, you're proud of your church, you see these stories, but then you walk out those doors and nothing really changes. You go back to the same life, the busyness of taking care of yourself and your family, and you forget what we talked about. And in 2 weeks, this sermon won't have made any difference. But let me be very clear. This sermon is not just intended to entertain you. It's not intended just to make you feel good about your church. It's intended to motivate you. It's intended to ignite you to change the world around you. See, maybe we should have gone with Ignite now that I just used it. Don't just be entertained by this message. Be changed by it. Be inspired by it. The New Testament book of Acts is a historical account of the early church, and so that's what we're going to look at today. So a guy named Luke, who was a physician and a historian, he writes this book about the start of the church, and then he talks about how that early church in Jerusalem grew to expand throughout the Roman Empire through the Apostle Paul and some of the other people, and how they carried the message and the love of Jesus Christ. And so let's look at Luke 2, and we're looking at verses 41 through 47, and it's going to talk first about the start of the church. Let's look at that first verse, 41. Those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. So this is the day the church started, the day of Pentecost. Peter preaches this message. 3,000 people become part of this church. They follow Jesus, and suddenly there's a church, and we would see how this church grows very rapidly and expands. But then he's going to talk about what that early church looked like. It's going to paint us a picture, give us an example of what it looks like. And that picture of the early church should really be the recipe for how we do church here at Charis City. So let's look at the rest of that, verses 42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. So this early church is doing some things that causes people to want to be a part of this family, to join this family, but more importantly, to follow after Jesus as part of that. This early church, they didn't have microphones, they didn't have electric guitars, they didn't have fancy lights, couldn't broadcast on YouTube and Facebook, but they had something way more important. They loved God passionately. They loved each other with devotion. And they were passionate about their mission to change the world around them. And that made a difference. And so let's look back at one of the verses. This is verse 42 to see what it says. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship. Devoted or devotion, that's a powerful word. It's a word that indicates you're really serious about something. Vocabulary.com defines that word as being focused on a particular thing almost exclusively. I might talk about that word as a way I describe my relationship with my wife. I'm devoted to her. She is exclusive to me. She is important. Devotion gives this idea of perseverance and passion and endurance in doing something. It means making something a priority. And one of the things that they were devoted or passionate about was fellowship, of living life together. They wanted to be there for one another. They wanted to share life together, encourage one another, and support each other when things were difficult. Celebrate with each other when things were going well. To be a family. They wanted to gather in each other's homes. They wanted to develop deep relationship with each other, even to the point that it was as deep as their own families. And this idea of fellowship is really summed up in the New Testament by all of the different one another commands. There's all of these different commands from Jesus and from the Bible that tells us how to live with one another. It says that we're to honor one another. We're to accept one another. We're to serve one another, to challenge one another, to forgive one another, to encourage one another, to spur one another on, and to love one another like Jesus loves us. And so this early church, they lived out these one another commands in front of a world that was blown away by what they were saying. Just imagine how this family would have been so attractive to people living in the Roman Empire. So they were a conquered nation. They were in a dark world that was violent. They were alone. And suddenly there's this group of people that love one another in a different way. Imagine what the sense of belonging that would have offered. And look, nothing really has changed in the last 2,000 years. We are way more digitally connected to one another than we've ever been. And yet, we've never felt more alone. There was actually a study done by Harvard University, and some of the preliminary results were published in a report in February of 2021 about loneliness. And they found that 36% of all American adults have experienced significant loneliness. Keep in mind, that's more than 1 out of every 3 people experience significant loneliness. And in certain groups, this percentage goes way up. Young adults, 61% of young adults say they experience significant loneliness. 51% of moms with young children experience significant loneliness. See, we were created by God to be part of a family, a part of a group of believers who support and encourage one another. And so when that's not happening, when we're not a part of a family like that, we don't thrive. We don't do as well as we should. In fact, this Harvard study talked about some of the emotional and physical problems caused by loneliness. It says that it causes depression, anxiety, heart disease. That one surprised me a little bit. Substance abuse and domestic abuse. We live in a world where people feel isolated, overlooked, and alone. So just imagine if we can create a place where we can provide authentic, loving community. It's going to make a difference in people's lives. But it does something even bigger than that because it draws them to Jesus. And if they get connected to Jesus and follow him, that will change everything. Verse 44 says that all the believers were together. I love that. We're supposed to study God's word together. We're supposed to pray together. We're supposed to take communion together. We're supposed to have dinner and enjoy life together. That's what it looks like. I think so many people think about their faith as a personal thing. Look, that's my private walk with Jesus. It's my faith. Doesn't really matter to anybody else. We think that's a private thing. But that's not what this passage in chapter 2 of Acts says. And in fact, it's not consistent with all the writing in the New Testament. It's not a personal thing. It is something that we do together. There are lots of people who become disillusioned with the church, and they've left. And they believe they can just follow Jesus on their own. But it doesn't even work. Think about this. How are we supposed to forgive one another if it's just me? How are we supposed to serve one another if it's just me? What does that even look like? Living like Jesus only works when we live in community. That's what it's built on. We were made for community with one another. It's how we flourish and grow. I want you to check out this video of how the church can make a dramatic difference in somebody's life by being a family. Check this out.
Hey, I'm Lil. I'm the director of operations here at Charis City Church, and I'm also Nathan's wife. So we wanted to create a family here at Charis City, and to do that using my husband's word of lavish. And if you think about that word, he uses that word all the time, lavish grace upon people. And I actually went and just looked up the definition of lavish because he uses it all the time. And it's to extend something so overabundantly, so extravagantly that people are overwhelmed by it. And we wanted to create a family that's where you take care of people in ways so deep and so personal that they feel that lavishness upon them of love and of grace and of hope in all of those ways. And we've done that. I've seen people do that not just by meeting basic needs, but also by praying over people and going to their homes and praying with them in their homes. Also by accepting every person when they walk in the door, no matter where they came from, no matter what they've done, no matter who they are or anything, just embracing them with open arms to say, you are welcome here. And then to continue that, to be excited to see them each week when they come back, and to continue just loving upon them to the point where it doesn't even make sense. Like, why would this church who doesn't even know me, I've made all these mistakes, or, I'm whatever, why would they do this? And really it's to always point them back to Jesus and the love that he bestows upon us, because we don't deserve it either. So it's to just continue living that out, that mission out over and over again of we have been given a gift that we don't deserve. So we need to continue giving that gift to others. What I've seen already is lives are being changed through each of us, through you, through me, through Nathan, through Chris. People are being impacted and changed when they walk through the doors of Charis City Church. Here in just a little bit, you'll see Tina baptized. She's one of the ones that we've helped here recently, and this is what we want. We want people experiencing the love of Jesus, but also being changed and accepting that love of Jesus as well.
When I first walked into church, I thought it was just another church that I was going to be judged. As soon as I walked in, I just felt something different. I talked to the pastor's wife, I talked to the assistant pastor, Chris. Just wonderful people, loving, kind. They don't look at you for who you are. They don't judge you. They just look at God's love that's in you, and they find that in you. Even though you feel you lost God, they make you know that he's still with you. And I found that in this church. I'm being baptized today, and I am very excited because it's going to be a big change in my life. I'm going to actually be on fire for the Lord. I know it. This church has changed my whole life. This baptism I need for myself. I had no purpose before. I had no purpose. I kept asking God, what am I here for? What am I here for? And he told me what I'm here for. He showed me. It's Charis City Church. This is where I find my people. The love. I've never seen and I've never felt true love, not even with my own personal family. I feel the love of God, the love of people. Through their eyes, they don't look at me in any other way but love. I love it here.
You're going to hear more of Tina's story next week when we talk about the church is the bride and we talk about holiness and what it looks like to follow Jesus. And she's going to tell you that the first time she came into our church, she got mad at us. She was mad at me. She didn't like what I was saying and she almost left. But she didn't leave. She stayed and listened, and God's power and God's word changed her. But let's be honest, she wouldn't have stayed to hear God's truth if she hadn't have felt God's grace from this community of believers. That's why she stayed. Grace and truth go hand to hand. We earn the right to share Jesus' truth by sharing Jesus' grace. When we love people in an unexpected way, they're willing to listen to what we have to say, even when they don't like it. Those things go together. That's how the early church transformed the world through the power of Jesus, and it's still our mission today. Look, to be a family, we've got to engage with one another, get to know one another. And I want to tell you 2 practical ways that you can help us be more of a family. And the first is on Sunday mornings. First of all, just look around and see the faces that you don't know right now, which is really cool. But on Sunday mornings, I want to challenge you to don't just hang out with the people that you know, but get to know new people. Go out of your way to say hello to people that you don't know, to talk to them. You might just find you have something in common. You might actually make a new friend. Now, our church does a really good job of going out of its way to welcome and greet new people. But did you know one of the main reasons people don't go back to a church that they visit for the first time is because they felt like nobody even knew they were there? Boy, that's not the church we want to be. And it's not the church that we are. But as we grow, we've got to be even more intentional about making sure that we're going out of our way to develop relationships with one another. We need to welcome and encourage one another on Sunday mornings. That's the first thing. You can help us be a family. Here's the other thing you can do. Get to know one another outside of Sunday mornings. Be a family. Family is not this. This is a church service. We worship God together, but this is not family. Family is through the week. Family is when we get together, we serve together, we eat together, we pray together. That's what we're called to. One of the great ways that you can become a family is to get involved in a community group this fall. We started our sign-ups today. If you reach out, you may have had to move it out of your chair. It's in the chair next to you. We've got a community group information form. You can sign up or you can get more information about that. Community groups are small groups that we have in homes once each week where we get together, we have a meal together, and people pray together, they read God's word together, and they start to do life together. They're there to support one another and encourage one another. We've also got a table out in the lobby when you leave. If you just want to get a little more information or you've got some questions, you can ask those questions at the table. We want you to get involved in that. Look, if you're sitting there thinking you don't have time for community groups, you're missing the point. Community groups are family. There's always time for family. It's that important. They were devoted to fellowship. It's that important. Or maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking, I don't know, what am I even going to get out of community groups? If that's the question that's in your mind, I want to challenge you in 2 ways. First of all, I want to tell you that you will get something out of community groups if you go in with the right attitude. But more important than that, I would tell you, you're asking the wrong question. The question is not, what will I get out of community groups? The right question is, what can I do for someone else in a community group? Because you may be in a group and you're thinking, man, I already pray, I read the Bible on my own, I've got some friends. What's really going to happen? You may just be the person someone else needs in their life right now. Maybe you've gone through something difficult that they're going through now, and you can encourage them and tell them how to walk through that. Maybe they need to learn how to pray, or they need to learn how to just be a Christian. What does it even look like to follow Jesus in their daily life? And you're the person that can show them those things. They may not even be a Christian yet, and you may be the person that needs to share your faith with them. See, the stakes are actually higher than what you think they are. Can I be really direct with you for just a second? When you're evaluating community groups through what you get out of it, that's not the mindset of Jesus. The mindset of Jesus is, what can I do for someone else? How can I serve someone else? Christianity is not a consumer religion. It's not about what gets done for us. It's what Jesus does in us and through us. That's the way we should view community groups. We start to look a whole lot more like Jesus when we think less about what are we going to get out of something, and we start to think more about what can I do for someone else. You can find sign-up cards in the seat next to you. It's important. It's important so that we can share with one another, so that we can be family. Look, if you're just coming to church on Sunday mornings, you're not becoming part of the family. You're just going to a worship service. Don't go to church. Be the church. That's the calling. So fellowship is a big part of family. The other part of being a family is taking care of each other and helping each other out when we're struggling, to encourage one another. Look at what the passage says about that in Acts 2, 44 through 45. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Imagine what that must have looked like to the world around them. You've got these people that are having a good time together. They're loving each other as a big family. They're all getting along, but they're doing more than that. They're taking care of one another. There aren't people that are struggling because they're taking care. They're helping each other out. That's our mission. It's what it looks like to be church, because we're a family. Think about that. I mean, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for my wife and kids to help them with a need. There's not a cost that's too high. There's not an effort that's too great to meet their needs. We're a church family. It's what we are. I want to tell you a quote by the great theologian Lilo, from Lilo and Stitch, when she said, "Family means nobody gets left behind." That's what this looks like. That's how this works. And when we show this kind of lavish, unexpected grace, and we care for one another in a way that doesn't even make sense, it gets people's attention. It draws them to Jesus' church. But more importantly, it draws them to Jesus, because they're drawn to something that they don't even fully understand. Look, I'm so proud of how our church is already growing in this. Man, I hear stories of people going over to each other's house and praying for one another, bringing meals to one another, helping each other move, taking people to doctor's visits, all these different things that we're doing to support one another as a family. But this family is even going further than that. Check this out.
I see a happiness in people that wasn't there maybe when they first walked in the door. I see a peace. It doesn't mean everything's perfect, doesn't mean there are no more hardships, but it's a peace that says, yes, we are cared for, we are loved, we are provided for. These are the things that, we're here. This is our moment right now.
I'm Cynthia B. Cade.
And I'm Jesse Cade.
And we've been with the Cherry City Church a little before Easter service, the second anniversary of Cherry City. We went out from homelessness 1/1/1, January the 11th, 2023, with the passing of my son within 5 days.
Well, we went from apartment to sleeping in a car at Walmart's parking lot, where we always shop at. And we'd never been homeless like that before.
We were introduced to Cherry City Church by Pastor Chris. We was blown away, I think, by the stage and the lighting that he just amazed by the lighting. And so when we got to Cherry City that day, we were welcomed at the door. We were hugged at the door. We were encouraged. We were loved on. The service was like no other because we had been out of church for a while. And it impacted us so much. But Pastor Nathan, he met us coming into the church and was letting us know that we're here for you guys. Pastor Nathan called us that Monday morning. He says, "Hey guys, I just got out of prayer for you guys. And we want you guys to know that before the day is over, that you guys are gonna have somewhere to sleep.
And you know how it is when a kid goes into a room and it got a bed and the kid's jumping up and down on the bed like that. Yeah, that was one.
And I was across the bed like this.
That was one of the things that was beautiful.
Wonderful. That was wonderful.
I mean, it was just so amazing to see the church literally as a family showing love in action. I mean, to just pour into our lives like that, to give support, encourage, motivate. I mean, we've never seen a movement like that and an outpouring, the love of a church to love on you. Just to be in tune and in touch with support, and that says that we're here.
We're in our own apartment now, and now we see that what it is to be back on our feet again and be independent.
The people of Cherry City changed our lives, so if it wasn't no Cherry City changing our lives, we don't know where we
back in that hot car, and we sitting in it. We sitting where they changed our lives at. With the roof over our head and having water coming out of the faucet. The little simple thing that we didn't have. We able to have that. Otherwise, we able to have our independence back. The church really saved my life. I just put it to you like that.
We're just gonna say that.
Yeah. I hate to think I'd hate to think where I would be, and had it not been for that,
Yeah, so
and I thank God for it.
Yes, we're grateful. So grateful, so grateful.
That's what church is. That's what family is. It's what it looks like. And if we have that kind of love, we're going to help Jesus change the world. Lead with grace, share truth. Here's what's so exciting. Just a few months ago, Jesse and Cynthia were living in a hot car. Now they've got an apartment. But they're going further than that. They love this church. They tell everybody they meet about Charis City Church. They invite everybody they run into to come meet their family on Sunday mornings. They're now making a difference in other people's lives. 2 of the people we baptized after service today got connected with us through Jesse and Cynthia. That's how that works. Grace leads to truth that leads to life change. That's the way it works. But see, that doesn't just happen. That's intentional. It's intentional grace. Do you know that 15% of your total tithes and gifts to this church have gone so far this year back out the door to other mission organizations and to show lavish grace to the people in our church and to the community around us? Yeah, you can clap for that. That's a big deal. We want to be a crazy, generous church. We want to show lavish grace. But to be a generous church, we have to be generous people. I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about time and talent and energy and also resources. Look back at the last verse of this passage. Verse 47 says that they were praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. This church loved in a way that was different than everything around them. They give without any expectation of anything in return. They served with passion and love, and it caught everybody off guard. And so people began to be more and more involved, and it became a movement that has transformed the world, and it continues today through us. Charis City is growing rapidly right now. You may not realize this, but in June, we had 50% more attendance than in June the year before. In July, we had 40% more people. That's fine, that's good, I'm excited about that, but here's what I'm more excited about. We're gonna baptize 4 more people today, and that means, we're already getting close to twice what we baptized last year, and we've still got 5 months left to go. That's how this works. Yeah, that's how this works. But here's the challenge for us today. We can be entertained, we can feel good about our church, and we can leave today feeling good about ourselves, or we can leave today being motivated to take another step, to do something even more. If we're going to be used by Jesus to change the world around us, we've got to be moved to action. We got to get out of our comfort zone a little bit. We've got to take some chances and do things a little different as individuals and as a church. If you know my wife, Lil, you know she does not like to talk in front of people. She does not like to get up here on this stage. She does not like to do videos. But I wanted her to tell this story of how this church shares grace and love with other people. But yeah, because nobody does more of that than she does. It's her passion. But you know, it's not easy for her. She had to get out of her comfort zone. So she actually filmed a little message for me that was unrequested and actually unwanted. She thought there was no chance I would play it. She doesn't know me very well. Check this out.
Nathan Rymer, I am coming for you. Nathan Rymer.
If Lil can get out of her comfort zone to help us grow in this area of grace, so can you. If we want to be a church that's welcoming and loving, every single one of us have got to join that effort on Sunday mornings. If we want to be a church that goes out of its way to address homelessness and help people who are hurting and in need and desperate, we got to be a church that's over the top in giving our time and our effort and our energy. We got to take a little risk to do that. We have to be generous individuals so that we can be a generous church. We have to love like a family to be a family. We want to be a church that shows intentional grace to others, one person at a time. And if we do that, I promise you, it's going to change everything. Let's pray.